Game changers, game changers. Welcome to At the Desk with Dr. KwA, the podcast where transformation begins with conversation. Today's episode is rooted in literacy, leadership, creativity, and service. But even more than that, it is rooted in purpose. Many years ago, on World Book Day, our next guest entered the world, fittingly, on a day dedicated to the power of stories. Today, she's a force across disciplines, educator, literary advocate, globally published photographer and filmmaker, TEDx speaker, author, entrepreneur, and award-winning nonprofit co-founder. Alongside her college sweetheart and husband, Raymond, she co-founded Hidden Gems Literary Emporium, a traveling nonprofit bookstore with a bold and beautiful mission to place free books into the hands of communities across the country while reigniting a lifelong love of reading in children and adults alike. That mission has garnered national attention, with Hidden Gems being featured on platforms such as The Today Show, PBS, CNN, and Fox Business. As executive director of Hidden Gems Literary Emporium, she develops impactful literacy programming for schools and communities while ensuring that access to books becomes access to opportunity. She is also a graduate student in global public health at Rutgers University, where her work continues to connect literacy, equity, and community wellness. At home, she's a devoted mom to her three children, Truth, Wisdom, and Faith. I love those names, whom she homeschools daily, instilling within them the same values of discipline, curiosity, and purpose that define her life's work. And through it all, she remains grounded in one belief: the fact that she's a humble servant to her community and to her creator. Mrs. Kaila Boulware Figueroa, welcome to the desk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And of course, because I met your wife before you, I actually know you because of your wife. And so this is very special conversation for me on many levels. I remember when you held wisdom when she was like this, seemed like this. And so for you to witness Hidden Gems grow, but more importantly, my children, thank you for just being a part of our lives.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be part of it. And so, World Book Day, fascinating day for you to be born, and the symbolic dynamics associated with the work that you are doing. Enlighten us about the work you're doing and how those two, uh, the day of your birth, the work that you're doing, how that seems to be part of your purpose.
I found out that fun fact about myself maybe only 2 or 3 years ago now. So,
Really?
and a lot of things that I came to know about myself, I found out in my adulthood. So even the meaning of my name, what is my
Mm,
first name, where does it come from? I found out about that in my adulthood. But if I would have known the power in what that was when I was young, um,
mm.
I could have used that as a superpower throughout my life. So that's why when we're
Okay.
speaking with young people, we're always asking them, do you know what your name means? Do you know where your
Mm,
name comes from? And so now as an adult, I found out I'm born on World Book Day. It's just a tangible example, like you were destined to do this. And
okay.
so you had the courage to take a non-conventional route to your career, right?
Mm,
But then you come to find out this, these certain things, this information, you look back, you realize that, okay, so I was put on this earth to do this, to help people in this way. And so I'm just blessed that, uh, I'm able to have a career where I love what I do every single day.
nice, nice. So, talk to us a little bit about your upbringing. Did you have an early relationship with books and storytelling growing up as a child?
Yes, I was the little girl with the book bag and it was way too heavy. But I just, every day, that knowledge makes you strong. And even Raymond, he grew up in Plainfield. He grew up in the Plainfield Public Library. He grew up in
Mm.
Plainfield High School right across the street. And so
Okay.
both of us have a childhood rooted in books for many different reasons. And when I was young, I didn't imagine myself being where I am now. I always thought I was going to be a doctor, actually, until I got to college. But yes, my parents were always big on education, and I'm really grateful for that because I see the fruits of it, and I
Mm-hmm.
see how seeds can grow when you put those seeds into young children.
Okay. And so, as we're talking about just your journey, when did you first realize that literacy could become a vehicle for impact?
Mm. That is a great question. I would say when I was younger, I always knew that literacy and education could do something. And
Mm-hmm.
then, people around you, the adults are always telling you, like, it could do something. They don't really tell you exactly what it could do, but they open your mind up to the vision. They kind of open up your imagination that if you have this tool, there are no limits. The possibilities are endless. But as a child, so now you're just using your imagination on what you could be, what you could do in the world. But when I got to Rutgers, that is a good question. When did I see it as a vehicle for impact?
Mm-hmm.
Mm, I would have to say, mm, when did I see literacy actually change someone's life? You know what? My honest answer would be in Troy, North Carolina. And without going into what happened in detail so much right now for this,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
we our family was in a situation where um if we could not read for comprehension, then the outcomes of our lives would be completely different. And so
Wow.
that moment was in those experiences, that was the time where it was like, okay, I need to read every word and understand every word before I agree or disagree to anything. And so that those experiences in my life, when we go into schools, especially with high school students who are about to enter what we call the real world, I tell
Mm.
them all the time, like, look, I've been through it. Okay, I'm not just giving you this book because you need to read it today, but the information that lies in here, it could literally save your life in the future. So that's the moment I would say where I saw how literacy can impact your life.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Wow. And so you and your husband have this emporium
Mhm.
appropriately named Hidden Gems. And
Yes.
there's a whole expression, if you want to hide something from us folks, right? Put it in the
Mhm.
book, because the prevailing narrative is that we don't like to read, or we can't read, or don't want to read. And so
Right.
Hidden Gems is more than a bookstore.
Mhm.
It feels like a literacy movement, right? So what
Mhm.
inspired you and your husband to create this element, this entity, this gem,
Mm.
to feed our
And
community of all places?
mhm. I think that I want to say myth, not myth, because I think it's rooted in some truth. Because you said, like, with people of color, there's a notion of, if you want to hide something, put it in a book. But I was talking to one of my friends about this a few days ago. We're only a few generations away from slavery. So this book, this tool right here, you could literally lose your life for being
Hmm.
caught with it. So if
Mm-hmm.
you want to hide something, put it in this book, because people are afraid to lose their life. The chances are very slim that they would risk their life to read some information, at least just a few generations ago. So that, for me, that doesn't come from, it's not because we don't want it. It's because we were penalized and, you know, killed for
Hmm.
coming in contact with it. And that just doesn't go away.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So with hidden gems, we remember that too. And so yes, there are hidden gems, but and now in this day and age, we don't have to be afraid of collecting these gems, of cultivating these gems, and of
Hmm.
spreading wealth in our communities.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
what was the founding mission for your business, for this journey that you and your husband are on? What was the founding mission? Traveling bookstore concept. I mean, that's beautiful. I know we have communities where they have boxes in different corners within the community where people donate books and things like that, right? Um, I don't know how many of those you'll find within some of the communities that we find ourselves. Uh,
Mm.
and so to have a traveling bookstore, right? What's the founding mission? Talk to us a little bit about the concept and the philosophy of books being accessed.
The founding principle was very simple, and it was that we all learn best when we're having fun, and especially with youth. We learn, and adults, all of us, we
Yes.
learn best, quickest, we retain it. We want to do it more when we're having fun. So, how do we bring this element of cool vibes and community and a fun atmosphere to something that it seems like it is getting dampened and dampened and dampened and dampened. We look at that, some of the data that you shared with me earlier, and the environment just feels so, it feels like a storm. But how do we bring some sunshine in that, so that children, especially, first, you have to be motivated to do it. You have to want to pick it up. So
Hmm.
that was really our founding mission, was just to get children and adults to have fun when it comes to
Okay.
reading. So when we were on Moore Street, all of our events were of that nature. There were no, there were, music, art, and when we go into schools and do our programming, we add all those fun elements as well. And so we pull people in like that. Now, when we started traveling, it was only after maybe a year of being stationary. Raymond said, we have to meet people where they are. Not everyone is going to
Mm.
be able to come to New Brunswick. And especially the children and the families that we're trying to touch, chances are they're not coming to New Brunswick on a Wednesday afternoon. How do we
Hmm.
get there? And so that's where our concept of free book tours, traveling the country, and now building our book fair on wheels, that's where that came from.
Nice, nice. And so, as you're doing this, as we're having this conversation, you're telling me how you guys arrived at this space. Um, Share with us what you've learned about communities through this work.
Hmm. We all live in an ecosystem, right? And I try to teach Truth this too. Just this morning, him, Truth and Wisdom, they were bickering about something. What was it, an orange slice or something? And I said, listen, you guys are part of an ecosystem. We are all working together, right? So we have an ecosystem in our home, and then we have an ecosystem in our building, and then we have an ecosystem in our city. And we all never stop working together. So when we go into communities that we don't live in, our
Hmm.
first approach is to always just talk to the people and say, what is education like here for you and your child? What's working and what's not way better than we do, and how can we help you? We're doing more than just coming and dropping off books and leaving. How can we be a part of this ecosystem so that we're strengthening the relationship with education,
Mm.
so that it's not just a saying that you say to your child, make sure you get good grades so that you could XYZ. But it's like, how do we strengthen that desire to want to know more by using these tools?
Hmm.
um So, but even in my own life, in my own education, I'm in graduate school now, and it's taken an ecosystem to get us through. Okay, everything takes the ecosystem, and everything takes community. We can't do anything by ourselves, and nor should we want to.
And I think that's a powerful disposition to hold, the fact that the community, aka the village, right, sustains you. Once you deviate from it, you find out the difficulties that you encounter without the support of that community. So I truly appreciate that aspect of the work that you're doing. And so just continuing with that, taking literacy directly to the communities. Uh, your work removes some barriers by bringing books directly into the community. Why is accessibility still such an important issue in literacy today?
Because basic needs come first. That's pretty much housing, food, clothing comes first, because what is education without those things? So unfortunately, I mean, I went to the grocery store and the milk was $5. And I said, when is this happening? Or you're driving by and every day the gas price is going up and you're like, am I in the twilight zone? Like, where?
Not even
And it's
close.
not
You're not.
even close. Not at all. So if I'm a mother and a father, and maybe I'm living in Newark, New Jersey, and my husband works every day and I work every night, and the oldest sibling is making sure everybody's getting to school, and then when they come home I might look at some stuff and be like, okay, and I'm going to bed. So where is that coming in at? Is There's no room for it, and
Mm,
it's unfortunate. There's no room for it unless you have to, we as the communities and the adults and the parents, we have to wedge that in there, and we have to make space for that. And that's where organizations like Hidden Gems comes in. We're coming in and we're helping families wedge that space in their
mm,
mind and in their home, because education does start at home. For a lot of
absolutely.
parents, they're just praying that whatever's going on at school is helping. Okay, I'm gonna keep the lights on, and I hope y'all doing what you got to do. And then the teachers are, it, it, so the question is
I'm biting on my
access.
tongue here.
No, spit it out. Spit it out. Your turn.
Listen, I love the fact that you're hitting on some of these elements that impact the growth and trajectory of our scholars, right? And our children. So
Mm,
you're given that reality check that oftentimes some practitioners, and that's what I call my teachers, practitioners don't get, right? What it took for Kyla to make it to school today, right? As you mentioned, mom is working, mom and dad are work, dad is working today, mom is working at night, right? So
mm,
at no real point are both parents simultaneously in the house. If you're
yep.
fortunate to have both of them, let's start
Yep.
there, right? Um, and so as you intimated or indicated, the older sibling is also taking on adult responsibilities to make sure that the younger siblings are being cared for and they're doing what they need to do. So Kyla is the one doing these things to make sure that, she helps mom and dad out and
Mhm.
the siblings. In the morning, she's likely the one who's going to get herself up and get her siblings up, right? Get herself finally to school,
Mhm.
only for an adult. And this is a conversation that I have on one of my upcoming shows, the sidebar. Just break the spirit of that kid, right?
Mm,
Failing
mm,
to
mm,
realize that the resilience of what that child had to do to finally make it to first block, maybe 5-10 minutes late. But rather than accepting, we give that child a hard time without ever, few practitioners do take the time to get to know their scholars and create an understanding and environment where scholars of that nature are embraced and afforded grace, right?
Hmm.
And so
Mhm.
that's a whole conversation. But I'm loving the fact that you're pointing these elements out, right? So when does mom or dad have time to take their child who they want to see the best for to the
Yeah.
library, right? To make sure that they get a book that's on their level, that they can read and enjoy and imagine from reading that book, right? So these are dynamics. And so as you put it, you're hoping whatever is being offered at school is sufficient to sustain and hopefully elevate, right? And so there are so many factors that goes into this. Um, but I'll stop preaching. I don't want to take away from your presence here, but you made some points that I'm like, whoo, it's a whole lot to be said about those things, right? It's a whole lot to be said about it. So, um, uh, accessibility being an important element, right? We have economic disparities that we need to address, right? That's part
Mm.
of the challenge, as you mentioned, the working mom and dad. And this isn't just in Black homes, it's also in Hispanic homes, some Asian homes, some white homes, right? So this isn't just something that's just um, being assigned to African Americans. Is a dynamic of just society. The
Right.
challenge is that when we get into that economic disparity, we find
Mhm.
that African Americans are oftentimes the hardest hit, right? Black and brown folks are oftentimes the hardest hit, right? And so we talk about mom and dad. Um, we also have to talk about the educational level of mom and dad, right? Because scholars who have educated parents tend to come into school with a larger vocabulary bank.
Right.
They tend to come in with a little bit more awareness, right?
Mhm.
And their drive is a little different, right? And so their word count when we talk about vocabulary, their vocabulary is here. Those who don't have that same, oftentimes, I can't say always, oftentimes, there's a huge gap between that dynamic. So these are things that I've seen, I've had to deal with and try to help fix as an instructional leader. And so these are all things that come into the equation. But anyway, let me kind of just you know what moments during your travels affirm or have affirmed the importance of your mission. Let me ask that question that way.
And just like you have said, you've seen, we can't ignore these things. Okay? We can't ignore
Absolutely
anything.
not.
Even in academia, in the presentation of my research, I try to find the balance between being too blunt and sugarcoating it. Because in academia it's too much sugarcoating. It's these issues are resulting in the loss of life, period.
Mm,
They're resulting in the loss of life. So to me, in academia and in education, we use very ambiguous terminology and say this ambiguous term is the reason why this is happening. And I'm just like, we live in a real world. And then as a mother, I'm like, y'all talk about my kids now and my kids' future. And so we have to be very specific about what we're talking about, especially in you having so many years teaching the people who are teaching our children, and you are
mm.
a very non-ambiguous personality. So and we need that.
I
Teachers don't
love it.
need
Non-ambiguous personality. I've never been described in that fashion, but I love it.
I'm gonna tell you right now what very non-ambiguous. Like this is what's happening, this is what it is, and this is what you need to do as an educator to make sure that your students have a successful life after you. It's not about you. It's not about your classroom. It's about how your environment is a part of their life ecosystem. So
Mm,
going back to the question of what have I seen, I will never forget, I was at a school in New Brunswick, and there was a third grader giving out books. Her and her peer came last. I had a book about all different types of animals, and I said, "Look at this book. It's big. It's colorful. Wow, this is really nice. What does this say at the top?" Um, she couldn't read it. It said animal. She's in third grade. It
Mm,
said animal, and she couldn't read it, and that broke my heart because at that time, truth was one or two, but I'm seeing him as a third grader not being able to read the word animal, and I'm
mm,
immediately like, wait, who is your teacher? Like, where, what, why, and so seeing things like that where I'm introducing material to children that that is at or below where they can't, and it's like that you can't hide the problem.
mm.
Can't hide the problem. You can discern the problem in a child in just a matter of moments. And when I started seeing that more and more and more, that it still breaks my heart every time, but it fuels me. That, and when parents are with their children and they don't want to take a book, or they give an excuse in front of their kid why they don't want to I pull them aside and I'm like, I know we could find you
Mm.
something, right? Like, let's just, you know uh
So, so part of what you're going up against in some of those instances, I just put him on the laptop or the iPad and in front of the TV because that has also become more commonplace uh,
mhm,
with respect to child rearing, right? Where
right.
rather than reading to your child every
Hmm,
opportunity you get, um,
mm,
engaging your child in those activities. And it's fascinating. We don't even play games with the kids anymore, right?
right,
Everything has been reduced to technology and the television. And so children don't play board games. When we were growing up, we also had less, I have to be honest and transparent, we also had less access to the level of technology and internet and all of the TikToks and all of the things that are currently available. But our parents, we have family time. We play games. We learn how to spell with Scrabble and we did things of those nature. Those things are not happening anymore in the households, and so
right.
that also increases the amount of work that practitioners have to do when that child walks into the classroom, right? And
Mhm,
so when I have, depending on where I'm working, it could be 15 kids, it could be 35 kids to one
wow,
teacher, right? And so,
wow,
and the work that I have to do isn't just focusing on just the kids, but I also have to do this and I have to do that. And so the
mhm,
demand on classroom practitioners is equally taxing, right? That's not
mhm,
lost on me as a former classroom teacher. It's not lost on me as a former admin. And so
right.
these are the things. And so parents and the community, right, when we talk about the village, have to be part of the conversation to help us pivot and change the narrative. Because I'm going to, as I said, I'll share some data shortly, you know,
Mhm,
that kind of should bring into perspective just the challenge that
yeah.
American education faces, especially when you move away from your more affluent districts into your socioeconomically challenged districts. You see the gaps are
Hmm.
vividly evident. So, all right, all right. You got me talking today. I don't like that too much right now, but
Well, I want to say something. I want to say something in response to what you just said. The
uh-huh.
I have some books here, right? The Color of
Mm-hmm.
Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And so this talks about the geographical,
Mm,
jurisdiction, legislative boundaries of communities, and how resources are moved, shifted, taken away from various area codes versus others. My capstone project for my program that I'm in now is looking at educational level and residential segregation. And it's looking at a series of cities that are only 1 mile away.
Mm,
You can walk that. You can walk it. And what is the education level of this place versus this place? What do the schools in this place look like? You walk a mile and what do they, and just putting a visual picture on. I gotta talk more. Oh, I told you about that. I gotta talk to you about this other part of that. But it's important that we see, because we
mm-hmm.
know, okay, in urban areas, schools probably look worse than they do in suburban areas. We know that. But what does
We
that
know that.
look like?
We know
We know
that.
that.
We know that. I mean, and so even though we don't say segregation, or we claim segregation no longer exists, or some people would like to claim that it doesn't exist,
Mhm,
it's very much alive and well, right? So,
mhm.
as you said, within a 1 mile radius or even a 2 mile radius, you go from one school district that looks one way to the next
Yep.
that has everything you can possibly imagine, right?
Mhm,
Meanwhile, and again, the argument some people, well, the government gives you guys money to do X, Y, and Z. It's the community that's not right. You get into these minutia related elements that comes with it. But I think
mhm,
the reality is that as much as we want to say schools are not segregated, they are very much segregated. Yes, you have a sprinkle of us, a sprinkle of them, depending on which side of the equation you're on. But
mhm.
it's not lost, right? It's not lost. It's not gone. It still exists. It's still in play. We just don't speak on it the way we should, and that's part of the challenge. That's part of the challenge.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, no, if you put a new name on it, right?
Mm.
It's a new descriptor. So to be segregated means to be set apart, isolated, or divided from others as a main group. So if there's a child who's misbehaving, you send him to Dr. Asante's office. That child is now segregated from the rest
Mm.
of the class. Okay. So if you have a state, if you have a state
Hmm.
where I try to use my words.
You're trying to couch your words. I get you. I got you. Trust me.
Well, no, I'm still trying to find that balance between sugarcoat and saying what it is. If you have a state, right, where you
Hmm.
want to set apart, isolate, or divide others from a main group of resources, of land, of clean water, of opportunity, of high paying jobs, of great houses, if you want to set apart this set apartness, maybe people would feel more if you call it set apartness. But these
uh,
things are happening, right? And it
oh,
all
right before
trickles.
our eyes. Right before our eyes. It's happening now under the current administration. Let's call a spade, right? And
Absolutely.
so the notion, and again, I don't want to go into the politics, but when we talk about making this country great again, what
Mhm,
does that mean? What does that really mean, right? Because I think somebody, pundit once asked the question, when was America great? I was like, that's an interesting inquiry, right? So the
mhm,
dynamics of what we're seeing and experiencing in some sectors when it comes to race relations and race dynamics, it's
mhm,
clearly evident, right? That these things that we fought for, they're trying to roll back. The Voting Rights Act. That's
mhm,
plain and simple, right? So we could get into all of those. But I want to maintain our focus on literacy. And I want to pivot and bring you into this conversation about just the creativity, your creativity. You know, not only are you an entrepreneur, but you're a photographer, filmmaker, TEDx speaker, author. How was or how has telling across different mediums influence the way you approach literacy and advocacy?
Mm, that's a great question. I I was going to say that I'm in a unique position, but I don't know if that's true because I feel as though everyone could do what I did, which is use your gifts, the gifts that you were born with and the purpose that you feel like you were given to create a life of freedom for yourself. And so photography was something that came natural to myself and to Raymond and our son.
Mm,
It's a gift of ours. It that aligns with our purpose of telling stories in a beautiful and authentic way.
okay.
And so writing, same thing, another type of gift that helps me in my purpose of telling and sharing stories in a creative and authentic way. So then with Hidden Gems, the
Mm-hmm.
work is getting those elevating the stories that um, are important to the next generation and giving them the opportunity to explore stories that help them find their own purpose. I've been reading a lot about human agency and how
Mm,
it is a um it's a foundational component of going back to public health outcomes. But
okay.
everything in my program I'm relating to education. So human agency, right? We've been talking a lot about the youth and the parents, and it seems like the communities that are experiencing these type, it seems like it's getting bigger. Now it's like you can be middle class
Hmm,
of color too and still be experiencing all of the things that we talked about so far.
right.
Human agency. That's where as an organization we're focusing on, because no matter what is going on in your environment, do you in your mind can you see a way out, or can you see what you can do? Can you believe that you have the agency to do it? If we're talking about physical health, do you believe that you could lose weight? Do you believe that you could stop drinking? Do you believe that you can walk? Do you believe that's where it starts? And that's
Right.
something again that we all know, that like my grandmother still, if you pray, if you believe, if you believe. Okay, but as the child is going through education and going through up all of these challenges, right? We got to give them something tangible
Mm-hmm.
too. So if they can read a book, or if they can uh have access to a story that fuels that in their mind, right? Like, okay, you can. And we teach our children since they were babies, I can, I will, I do. I can, I will, I do. And
Mm,
using a book to give them something tangible so that they have the agency to do whatever it is that they want to do.
right.
Um yeah, it's important that we pinpoint that.
So on with respect to that and the importance of you know agency, um,
Mhm.
when we start talking about stories, from your lens, why do stories matter so deeply in shaping identity and community?
Mm. Because identities are built off of the stories that you tell yourself, the stories that you've been told, the stories that your parents have been told. We started this conversation by talking about, if you want to hide anything, put it in a book. That's a
Mm-hmm.
story that's told and
Right.
passed down. And then, so when we think about where did that story come from? So now I'm a child, I'm in third grade, and I'm a part of this statistic that you're going to show us, right? I'm a part of that. What's the story in my mind? Is my story that I'm not smart, I'm always late, I'm always in detention, I'm not getting good grades? Is that my story? Or is my story like, you know what? I'm going through some challenges, but um, Dr. KwA told me that, he told me he told me that I could, and now that story starts to change. So
Right.
we are the authors of our own lives. Not saying that we won't ever go through challenges, but that agency is so important to our
Hmm.
honestly, to our survival at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the stories also provide a window into possibilities of what you could be or become, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
what you can aspire to. So I think that's critically important. As you're saying that, it kind of reminds me, uh, you know, my lived experience as an admin. One year I was sending a group of first and second graders, I believe it was, to Broadway to go see The
Mm,
Lion King. It became a whole debacle and spectacle because somebody else in leadership in an acting capacity above me felt that that wasn't a trip for that age group. And my
mm.
argument was that two towns over, little Sally has seen this show probably a dozen times. And when little
She go
Sally writes a
every
little,
year.
when little Sally writes her little stories or, her English composition or whatever it is, that elements of that find its way is weaved into her narrative,
Right.
right? Because we say she's such a wonderful writer, and she brings all these into the her writing. Well,
Mm-hmm.
our scholars can't do that because we're not exposing them to elements that they can also identify with and dream
Right.
about and try to make part of their future worldview and
Mm-hmm.
incorporate into their writing. So it was a whole fight. Needless to say, I made sure my kids went to Broadway, and we did it a few more times. But that's just,
See? That's
you
that
know. But you
non-ambiguity.
right, but you have to fight for these things, and it's not, Lion King is not an eighth grade trip, right? To me, that was not an eighth grade trip, but that was the argument that that should be for an, Anyway, all that aside, my scholars went. We dealt
Good.
with whatever the fallout was, and it is what it is. They are better
Yeah.
for it, and I make no apologies for that. Anyway,
I'm
so we were talking about data, right? So I want to kind of pull in this data real quick
okay.
to share with our audience. Um, because I want to talk about your graduate program and kind of help
Mhm.
us see. So just looking at literacy in America, across America, right? We're realizing that the scores are declining, have been declining, and they were declining before COVID. And I think that's something that I want to make sure that our audience is clear on. It didn't just start at the end of COVID; it was declining prior to COVID's arrival, but we're talking
Mm,
roughly 2/3 of our U.S. fourth graders scoring below proficient reading levels, right? The National Assessment of Education Progress sees the score sitting at its lowest in over 3 decades. We are looking
mm,
at a shift to the science of reading, which I find interesting because I think, as I shared with you, growing up or coming up in my generation, we have phonics. We did all of these things that they talk about, the science of reading. Shifting to it is because we had shifted away from those types of things as part of the curricula for years, and we're paying the price for it. So now this quote unquote science of reading is making its way back into curricula because of just the numbers that we're seeing. But when we talk
mm,
about, the segregation factor, the socioeconomic challenges and those dynamics, here's what reading or literacy across ethnic demographics is looking like now, right? When we talk about deep equity gaps, you know, take a look at these numbers, right? When we talk about African Americans, 84% below proficiency. American Indian and Alaskan Natives, 82%. Hispanics, 80%. Whites, 59%. Asian Pacific Islanders. These are some huge, huge, huge numbers that
yeah.
we are looking at in terms of just the dynamic of literacy reading comprehension. You talk about fluency. We talk about
Mhm.
vocabulary. Remember, we used to take vocabulary tests almost every week. You were given a set of words, right? And you had to learn how to spell it, use them in sentences, and all of those things.
Mhm.
I hate to admit that we went away and have gone away from those even basic elements, right? Phonics.
Mhm.
You'll be hard pressed to find phonics in most schools these days, right? But if
Right.
they're going back to it, I guess they realize the old tried and true methods did work. you know, all that's shiny, the shiny objects are not getting us where we need to be. It's causing more of a deficit than anything else. But these numbers are disturbing.
Yeah.
These numbers are disturbing. And you're talking about, we like to hold our nation as one of the greatest on the planet. But if we are, then these numbers should not be at play, right? If we are, then these numbers should not be at play, especially within the educational sector of our nation's people. So, but I
Right.
wanted to share this before I got us into more of a conversation on your program, right? So the program that you are currently in, your graduate program. Let me end
Yes.
this real quick. Talk to us about just how you're connecting
Mhm.
literacy with wellness and equity, right? And we're using the word equity. We know that is a crime these days to use that verbiage, because anything that has to deal with equity, suddenly people, get all uppity and offended by it. But talk to us
Mhm.
about that. How your program in global public health, uh,
Mhm.
the interest of it, connecting it to literacy, and of course, wellness.
Right. To me, education is a public health issue. To me, when we're talking about the physical health, the physical, the cognitive health of people, emotional health, we are also talking about education. So this program allows me to think, in the educational sphere, if I'm always, and I always try to just put myself in the mind of a student in the classroom, right? The mind of a student in the classroom. We talked about basic needs, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
food, clothing, housing, and a lot of those challenges students are still facing. But then how does their education affect their health from that point and into the future and vice versa? So to me it's like um maybe not a seesaw in a balance like this, but they're
Mm-hmm.
interwoven in some way. So earlier you were talking about how some practitioners, they'll look at a student being late, but they won't look at all it took to get for the student to even get there, right?
Right.
So in my program, a lot of the concepts and the theories that we're learning that are applied to physical health are also and should be applied to education. So right now we're learning about the life course theory, which is something innately that we all kind of know and feel. How a person's health at one point in time is dependent upon the before and all of the transition turning points up into this point. Same thing
Mm-hmm.
with education, right? So we can't look at that 84%. What?
It's sinking in, right? Yeah. Yeah.
84%?
Yes.
If we had 30% of anything, we would be up in arms. Like if it was on the news, America lost 84% of its money today. What? Chaos. If your child comes home with a 30%, you're like, is something wrong? What? You're not paying attention? You if you open your, TD bank and 84% of your money disappeared, that is an emergency to me.
It's an emergency. It should be an emergency to all. But again, this is what we're doing. We're busy trying to ban books. Let me
Yeah.
not go in there. Whew, bring it in. Yes, yes. So yes, yes, 84% of anything should be alarming, right? If I've lost 84% of my account, heck, if I had $20 and I lost 84% of it, I might have an attitude, especially if I didn't intend to spend it, right?
Hmm. And
So
so,
yes.
and going back to my program, so to me, that is screaming health issue. To
Mm-hmm.
me, screaming public health issue. There's a health issue of the public. We're not educationally healthy. We are definitely not building educational wealth, and and it's affecting how long certain people are living. Loss
Mm-hmm.
of life. That goes back to what I was talking about. It's too ambiguous. People are losing their lives. Children are losing their lives, right? And so that's one thing. One of the many ways this program is helping me put a wider lens on the work that I do in education. It doesn't just stop at this book or in a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah,
So, and I love your disposition on all of this because it's warranted, it's needed, and I
mm,
hope the game changers out there who are tuned into this episode will lend their voice to their level of concern, or their lend their voice to how we can begin the process of shifting the narrative, right? So these are some of the things that I'm hoping these conversations spark,
yeah,
and we can kind of you know help the flame a little more so that the conversation becomes more of a global conversation. Uh,
yes.
how in terms of just what you've been doing, how should schools and communities rethink literacy beyond
Hmm.
test scores?
I think that I know that in any situation, if we put ourselves in the seat of the student, so I understand administratively that we have to do certain things, teach in certain ways, and structure and system is good for communities, is necessary. But we, as the dispensers of the knowledge, of the information, if we put ourselves in their shoes,
Mm.
you called the age old wisdom. I don't like using the word old. Classic, uh, timeless wisdom.
Vintage. Can we accept vintage?
Vintage wisdom says put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I think, and we not I think, we will see changes happen in the lives of our students if we do that in our heart. And I know that's not a business answer, but that is the truth. If we
No,
do that more at every level, we'll see them change.
and I think it's an important component to any and everything that we're doing, right? Because if we don't put ourselves in that space,
Hmm.
we become dismissive of what's going on, right? So I used to get so furious. I would have money set aside for field trips, and I had teachers who didn't want to go to certain places because they didn't like it, right? And I'm like, it's not for you, and it's not about you. Like, gritted teeth. I can still see one of my my support staff members who were like, okay, calm down, kind of talk me off the ledge on occasion, right? And so when you talk about helping people see so I used to have to put some of these individuals who were parents, I had to
Hmm.
put them in the space of, if their child's teacher thought the way you're thinking,
Mm.
will your child ever get to go anywhere? Right. And
Right.
so for those who were parents, it
Hmm.
resonated, right? Your child is
Yeah.
excited about going to, let's say, Liberty Science Center, right? But the teacher is like, I don't like Liberty Science Center, so we ain't going, or I don't want to go. Now we gotta look for another chaperone. Like the inconveniences that might come with it. And so
Right.
I get that piece because, again, what I try to encourage practitioners, listen, you may not live in the community, but you really need to understand the community in which you are working so that
Mhm.
you can forge that relationship dynamic that will yield years of positivity, of positive outcomes for that scholar. When they
Mhm.
know you care, they'll learn how to read, but when they get that you don't care, you telling them to read is like, yeah, whatever, right? And so anyway, but I
Yeah.
I
Eh,
I, I I like the fact that you're helping us understand the importance of walking in somebody else's shoe, right? That was
mhm.
another adage, old age. I don't want to say vintage expression. Until you
Vintage
walk the
wisdom.
mile, until you walk the mile in somebody else's shoe, you really don't understand their real journey. We can make conjectures and assumptions about it based on what we're seeing, but
Mhm.
yeah. So that's an important piece that the key now becomes how do we finagle that into the work that we do within the school setting, right?
Mhm.
And that's a challenge because it requires a climate and culture that allows for that flexibility to manifest, and
Absolutely.
that's important. That's important. But before I get you out of here, you know, I want to definitely talk to you about motherhood, homeschooling, and your purpose. See,
Okay.
motherhood. I like I said, I love the fact that the names of your children. I mean, like what's your name? Truth. It's like no, for real. Like what's your name? I can see that happening, right?
Of
Or
course.
wisdom, right? Or wisdom. Man, stop playing with me. Like wisdom. No, for real, that's my name, right? Faith
Mhm.
is a common name. Nia, purpose, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but why homeschooling over public education? That is
Okay.
my curiosity. Talk to me.
I Truth was born March of 2020. So Ray and I are becoming parents for the first time at the beginning of COVID era, right? And
Mm,
so our lens on parenting and just the life for our child was kind of shaped by this era of not knowing what was going to happen, of lockdowns, school, all these things, right? So even before that period though, Raymond and I would discuss things like this. And because of our experiences in public schools,
mm-hmm,
not that they were all bad, just our experiences. And then also, as when you go to college, you start reading, you can read anything you want. You
mm-hmm,
start talking to people, your mind opens up. And we didn't even really know that I'll speak for myself. I didn't even know that homeschooling was even a possibility for my child until I got to college and started, reading more and things like that. Um, so for us, and also we love the freedom that we have to craft their curriculums. We can introduce them to um, anything that we want at an earlier age. And so we've
mm,
seen how quickly children can grasp onto things if you just put it right in front of them. And so again, I see and appreciate the blessing in our freedom because we have our own businesses. We have the freedom to homeschool. But
mm-hmm.
part of our work through Hidden Gems is to say, look, you don't need to quit your job so you can homeschool education starts at home. We start teaching our children as soon as they can hold up this, they got it. That's what you're getting. And you're flipping through and you're asking, you can hold a crayon? Here you go. Draw, There's ways that you can infuse education and schooling at home even if they're still in it's all about the foundation that you set. So
Absolutely.
because we were given and blessed with the freedom to run our own businesses and make our own schedule. Of course we want to, do
So
that for all.
I asked that question because I know one of your darlings at a tender age knows his way around the camera to
Come
the point
on.
where I've been jealous of looking at some of his work and I'm going, damn,
Come
that's a nice
on.
shot, and so again, you have them at an early age. They're in that sponge phase, right? Where they
Yes.
absorb and they'll learn whatever you present to them, and
Yes.
giving them some boundaries, but some freedoms as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think? I think you mentioned it, but I just want our audience to kind of get a bit. Like, what is it that you think you could do that with homeschooling that you cannot do or get with public education?
You make the curriculum and you can teach them anything that you want. My a lot of the lessons that I teach, truth and wisdom, because she's there, she's around, but really truth. We did a whole curriculum on neurology. Why? Because I was studying things like this, psychology, the brain, how things.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, and you can use tools like Khan Academy. They had a section on neurons, neurology,
Mm-hmm.
and he can tell you the parts of the brain. He can tell you what happens when you learn something new. And it's an amazing opportunity to introduce concepts to your children early on. So with photography, as soon as he turned 2, Raymond gave him a camera. He's had one
Mm,
ever since. So these are things you not because, again, not because public school is bad, but because of the structure and the system. You can't just give every 2-year-old a camera, you
mm-hmm.
know, or a paint set or an instrument, or logistics come with these things. But
Right.
when you say, you know what, our home is also our place of learning, don't call it a school, because school, our home
Comes
is
with a
our
different
center.
connotation.
Right. Our home is where we cultivate our minds and the hearts of the people who live here. Our home is a
I
cultivation
like that.
center.
I
Our
like
home
that.
is a place of exploration. See, that feels better, right?
It
It's all
sounds
about
a
the
whole lot
feel.
beautiful. Yeah.
It sounds beautiful. So for parents who are listening who work full time, right? Just think about ways, and whatever works for your home structure and situation and environment. How can we make sure our home is always a cultivation place of learning and
Mm,
exploration?
I love that. I love that. I love that. So before we bring this segment to a close, what do you hope
Okay.
your children learn most from watching your work?
Mm, that is a tearjerker. Um, that is a tearjerker because as a parent, right? Going back to ambiguity, every parent just wants their child to be happy, be successful, have a good life, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But what does that mean? I hope that my children will learn how to always consider other people and know that what you do for other people is a reflection of how you feel about yourself. I want them to always see that she woke up every day and did what she loved every single day. She used the things that she was good at to help other people. And Raymond came up with this saying, live to give. Her life was about giving and feeding the ecosystem, the place of wherever we are. I teach them, no matter where you live, home is where the heart is. So you said before, the practitioners, right? Some
Mhm.
teachers who don't live in the city that they work in, um but chances are they spend more hours in that school than
Oh,
they
they do.
do.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. I can speak. I can say that for myself. Right. My 29 years in the district I worked in. I was hardly here. This is since retirement. I finally spending more time in the township where I actually have been paying bills and owning a home.
Right.
So yeah, yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
then you do live there. Kind of you're
You
absolutely a part of the ecosystem
you are you are you
of
are
that place, right?
are
And
absolutely. Yep.
so going back to your question, I want my children to see that so that when they grow up, they're using their gifts to help other people to make a living, a successful business for themselves, whatever they so choose. I want them to have the freedom also that I have to wake up and to make to study whatever I want, to do whatever I want, to live the way that I feel like we were supposed to live in this life, which is just happy and at peace, right?
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
we always say we're a service of our creator and our community. As parents, right? You don't give your child life so that they can struggle their entire life, so that they can be stressed every day. Why would a parent do that? No, I want you to be happy. But you not listening, so you making yourself stressed. That's another conversation. But that's what I
It's
want
stressing
for
me
them.
out in the process, but that's another conversation indeed.
Right, yes. But all in all, I just hope that they look at the work of Hidden Gems and say, I could do that too, or I could do something better.
All right, all right. So we are finally at that bewitching hour. We've exceeded our 60-minute window, but we are going to bring it to a
Yay!
close. So here's our reflection inquiries on
Okay.
leadership, right? What does servant leadership mean to you today?
Mm, that means having the responsibility, but not because someone is making you do it. It has to come from the heart to give something to someone
Mm-hmm.
that maybe you do not have, right? So I still the wait, we don't say old, what do we say? Vintage. The
Vintage.
vintage wisdom, right? Of giving the clothes off of your back with the faith, knowing that it's going to return. If you see
Right.
somebody needs it more, that's what that means to me. So, servant leadership means having faith that knowing that what you need, you're always going to get because you're thinking of the needs of someone else.
Okay. And so here we go with the educational reflection. What is one
Mhm.
thing every child deserves access to beyond academics?
Are we talking about something tangible or ambiguous? Oh,
You can
okay.
make it tangible. You can make it ambiguous. You can make it a hope.
You know what? I have a lot of answers for this, but I'm gonna just say one thing that came to the top of my mind because you mentioned it and you did this for your students with that field trip. Every student deserves to leave their town to see something else. So I don't care if you're going to see the Lion King. I don't care if you're going to a museum, or I don't care where you're going. Every
Mm,
child should be leaving the town that they live in to go somewhere to do something.
to see other parts of their
That's it.
environment or community, right? Outside of their community. That's cool.
Their
I like
land.
that. I like that.
This world is your land. I tell my children, the whole thing, not just where you live, not just your
Mm-hmm.
state. This whole world is yours. This is your land. See it.
That's right. All right. And my final question is a legacy question. When people reflect on the impact of hidden gems years from now, what do
Mm,
you hope they say? What do you hope they say?
hmm, mm. What do I hope they say? Mm. I can tell you what I hope they see. I hope they see a family of people who love books emphatically so much that for the past X amount of years they have been traveling the country giving away free books, giving away resources for parents to use in their home, and inspiring children and adults to fall and stay in love with reading. That's what I hope they see. Now, what I hope they say, I hope at least one person can say, you know what? I was failing school, but the Hidden Gems book bus came to my school one day, and by the time I got off of that bus, I was sold. I went right to the library. I went right to my teacher and asked her to help me. I want to see and hear stories like that. That because all of us adults, we remember that one person that came to school or that one person that you met that caused a turning point in your life. That's what I want to
Mhm.
see. And I want to
Okay.
see and say some turning points in people's lives that's going to lead them on that's going to get them where they're supposed to go.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Mrs. Figueroa, thank you so much for joining us today. Truly appreciate you
Thank
being here.
you. Thank you
All
for
right.
having
Don't go too far. I'll be back to chit chat with you some more. Game changes, game changes. Listen, listen, listen when I tell you this was a fantastic conversation. Mrs. Figueroa, thank you for joining me today and for reminding us that literacy is about so much more than reading. It's about dignity, access, imagination, wellness, and hope. Your work demonstrates that when we place books into the hands of children and communities, we are not simply distributing pages, we are expanding possibilities. And to our listeners and viewers, thank you for joining us. Here at the desk with Dr. KwA, we believe that transformation begins with conversation. And today's discussion reminds us that sometimes transformation begins with a story, a book, a single act of service. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Dr. KwA, Dr. Kwame Ray Duasanti, aka Dr. KwA. We will see you next time. Be well.